I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about unlocking the resilient leader in you. Now, if you're on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe. You know this helps me, of course, but it also helps other people who are looking for this kind of information. Thank you. Now, if you were lucky enough to see the movie The Devil Wears Prada, you witnessed some beautiful acting from Meryl Streep to Anne Hathaway to Stanley Tucci to Emily Blunt to Adrienne Grenier. I certainly enjoyed the characters and the story. But what really popped out for me were the numbers. Fashion is a really big business. According to SciTech Today, the industry produces 100 billion garments annually, and there are only 8 billion people on this planet. The industry employs over 80 million workers globally. It utilizes about 93 billion cubic meters of water annually. For example, it takes 700 gallons of water to manufacture a cotton shirt. And in total, textiles create almost 20% of worldwide clean water pollution from finishing products and dyeing. And at the other end, 92 million tons end up in landfills. And that's the equivalent of a truckload of textiles discarded every second. However, worldwide fashion market is estimated at 1.84 trillion and expected to reach $3 trillion, that is. It is one of the largest sectors in the world economy. So fashion is a really big business. But what can we learn from how we clothe ourselves? What does fashion say about us besides covering our nakedness and keeping us warm? When I went to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, I saw a great deal that helped me understand why I live in a house made of brick and wood. I saw paintings that helped me understand how people saw the world before they realized the earth is round, and lots more. But the number of examples of fashion was rather slight, even though I know it really helps to understand that the modern suit, you know, that three-piece suit that men very carefully put on every day, was actually built upon the concept of a suit of armor. Now, once you know that, you see a business person dressed in a suit very differently. Well, today, I have a remarkable guest who will talk about her career shift and about fashion from the perspective of what does it teach us about ourselves. We'll be focusing on the latter part of the 19th century. Very interesting period, you'll discover. I am delighted to be able to introduce you to Brenda Buck. Brenda Buck is the owner and curator of Venura Studio, an artisan boutique and learning center built on the belief that fashion should not only be worn, but also learned, created, and experienced. I love that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. She was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and was surrounded by culturally rich influences that continue to shape her appreciation for craftsmanship, artistry, and personal expression. And after coming within one semester of completing a degree, I can't believe this, fashion design, Brenda's path took her an unexpected turn. And she ended up in East Texas serving social services in city municipalities. Utilizing her master's degree in vocational rehabilitation, she dedicated her work to helping others build independence and purpose, a mission that still influences her approach today. I love that one, Brenda. I really do. Well, I think that's probably enough because you're going to talk about Brenda. I know you are. So welcome to Unlocked, Brenda.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here today.
This is my pleasure completely. All right. You continue to foster creativity and confidence. I love that. Through curated collections and hands-on learning opportunities, encouraging others to embrace personal style with intention, joy, and authenticity. And I think you do that through your classes, don't you?
I do. I do. And very much everything that we do. Because clothing is a connected point that we all share. I like that top. Oh, I like those glasses. Oh, I like that pair of shoes or, all that fun stuff. So, but it in this certain point, everything goes backwards. There's really nothing that hasn't already been made. It's just evolving.
Yeah. Well, let me just finish on the classes because they're ongoing in your
Yes.
store, right? I
Yes.
want the audience to know that because it's not just a matter of selling clothing, but you want people to really learn about that process.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
good.
Everything fiber. So we actually call our studio the Everything Fiber Studio.
I love it. And you can get access to it through your website.
Sure
Yes.
thing.
All right.
Yes.
Well, I love that you had a full career before you jumped back into fashion. What drew you back?
Well, I guess I had been designing clothes even since that point in time. It just so happened that life took a different turn. And it was still a passion, but it looks different. Now, when I got out, my whole dream when I was 18 years old, when I jumped into that, was to become a fashion designer and blaze the world. And now, I'm not a young pup. I'm much older. The vision has changed slightly, and yet the passion is still there. But this time, I'm wanting to just intersect people in a completely different way and what that looks like to dress yourselves with more intention. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to also be talking about vintage clothing today.
Yes.
Yes. Now, vintage clothing,
Yes.
as I recall, is typically 20 to 100 years old. That's what Wikipedia tells me.
It is.
So we'll knowing that, why does vintage clothing still matter today? And what can it teach us about how we view clothing?
Well, I have a
And
friendly
I'll throw
fly
those.
that's trying.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Tell me again.
I have a friendly fly that's about to fly. Yeah. So we're going to interview. We'll ask him a few questions as we go too.
That's a great idea. And when you're ready for the slides, we'll bring them in.
Oh, that's awesome. Because clothing really, I mean, we don't wear togas anymore and we don't wear leaves anymore. And so how did we get from that point to today? And there's large pockets of things where there's so much commonality. But what's interesting to me is that it really goes pretty much in a straight line. When we were wearing togas and toga-esque type clothing, really to show prestige and to show that you were higher up, you wore more. You had more layers, more and more layers, more and more layers. And then eventually they started putting a tie on it, putting it around the waist, defining the waist, putting in some sleeves, doing all that good stuff until we get the big full skirt. Now, when you're talking 1500s, 1700s, where we have these big full skirts, those hung around with us for a really long time. That's when we started seeing that underbody armor of those corsets and those big hoop skirts and all that good stuff. And it's really interesting to me how long we stuck with that because that was extremely uncomfortable and heavy, weighted, expensive, everything that you could possibly imagine. And yet for 800 years, 700 years, we lived with these garments. But why did it change? And I guess that's why my particular interest in collecting starts at 1850, because at 1850 it was a dramatic shift in what happened in our clothing, and it continues even to today. But the changes that happen within that 100-year period, 1850 to 1950s, really kind of dictate where we go from now and who we are at this point. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, gosh, I was thinking about those corsets that you talked about. So much of what I always think about when I think about clothing from these earlier times is the burden that they placed on us
Yes.
to manage.
Yes.
with all that.
Very
Hmm.
much so. Because ladies were working out on the fields in these dresses. I mean, now the corseted and the finer clothing was more of a you were to be seen, kind of a thing. But even just your everyday type clothing, you were working the cows, you were working getting the vegetables out of the field, you were wearing this dress. It
Hmm.
was not a pair of pants.
Hmm. Wow. Should we look at some examples of this? Is it time for that?
Let's do. Let's
All
do.
right.
That'll be fun.
And I'll just let you tell me when to change.
Okay, so 1880s. This is a very typical outfit for a walking and a traveling outfit. This would not necessarily be one that we would go out in the fields and gather up the corn, but this was probably a middle class outfit. What's fascinating is there's so much similarities through this period of time, and yet the changes are so subtle until they completely cross over the bridge,
Hmm.
so to speak. And right here, we're still wearing those big hoops. First of all, if we can just picture the big side hips, that went for quite a period of time. But when we get to 1850, those big side hip panels shift to the back. Now, there's a period of time where we have a bell shape to where you have fullness in the front and it's symmetrical all the way around, but it's the big full skirt. Tara, Gone with the Wind, that's a perfect example of the big skirt. So here in 1880s, that shifts to the very back. So you have a very slender front, flat front, and that hoop pushes all of that weight then to the back. And then you have a bustle that would sit right at the top, at the very back of the end of the back, and you would carry that around. So that's kind of what went on during this time. And of course, look at the collars, all
Yeah,
very high,
very high.
very high.
When I'm looking at the buttons, I mean, I just can't
All
imagine
the
having to
buttons.
button all those buttons up.
And
And
those are all real buttons. I mean, yeah, it's a lot of buttons, and it's a lot of buttons to even take off and on these mannequins whenever we do that. Now, what's interesting about this particular outfit is that the corset is inside this jacket. I know we can't really see that here. Now, you would still wear some tightening underneath your garment. At this point, you would still have that, but there's quite a bit of boning in this jacket itself, too,
hmm,
that sits on top of the skirt. There's no zippers. It's all hooks, buttons, and snaps.
hooks, buttons, and snaps.
Mhm. That
No
is.
Velcro.
No Velcro. Velcro was a much later invention, which I'm so grateful for. But no, at this point in time, it was still all those buttons. So lacing, you typically had somebody else that helped you with that to get you in your
Mhm.
corset. And then you would have to have somebody help you get in this because even though this looks like two pieces on the top, it's one piece.
Ah.
That vest underneath it is still attached to the jacket. So you
And the
had
skirt
to
as
get in it.
well is all attached.
It's all attached.
Ah.
Mhm. It's all attached.
Hmm.
So if we want to go to the next one,
Ah.
so this one has a very interesting story because this is kind of about this time. We're starting to get a little bit more refined in how we're looking. Now, again, we're not talking a very long period of time. So this is happening very quickly, 10 and 5-year gaps. This one right here, this dress is a beautiful purple and a beautiful emerald, if you can see. And even though we had color before, we've had color in garments and threads and weavings and things like that, but it was very meticulous. It was very labor intensive. So you would not see a dress like this even just 30 years earlier. But about this period of time, they started developing these dyes. And ironically, the term that outfit is to die for came from this particular type of dress and this dye because what they used to make this dye was arsenic. And at the time, of course, we have different knowledge about what that looks like now, but say the person sweat and it leached inside of their skin, they were starting to lose their hair, they were breaking out. All those interesting side effects of arsenic, which are just not so good for us. Our bodies like that very well. And people did actually die from wearing these garments until they figured out that it was the dye that was causing those issues. We still have to handle this dress very carefully today.
Mhm.
It doesn't go away. It's still in the dress.
Mhm.
Ironically, some of the dresses during that period of time had 30% of arsenic in them that when they recycled them and once they realized what was going on, they used them as poison in their fields to kill bugs. Yeah. When you wrap your head around that for just a minute, it's kind of profound. We've come a long way. We really
Yeah.
have.
Mm.
But it's a beautiful garment. Absolutely beautiful garment.
And the color, that green is just so
It
stunning.
is. It is. It's stunning. So when I wear these colors today, I definitely appreciate the fact that we don't have to worry about that. It
Yeah.
comes from a much different source than what they contended with. But that probably lasted about 5 years-ish.
Mhm.
Well, that was all going on before they realized really kind of the source.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next one, this one's pretty fun. This is a walking suit. And this is all one piece too. I find garments so fascinating coming from a perspective of construction and everything else. These are so complicated. These are not easy. And
Mm-mm.
if you think about the 1800s, we were really just starting to have sewing machines in a large way. Now they were developed much earlier, but not everybody had them. And even then they weren't necessarily functional quite yet. But about this period of time, we're starting to see more of them. But this garment is hand done. Every piece of this is hand done. So if you'll notice on that front part, that's all pleated. And then it comes down to pleats down at the bottom with all this fringe. And when you handle this fringe, you can tell that it was handmade fringe. They pulled apart threads, knotted them together, and then stitched this on. It's remarkable. There's no other way to say it. Our fashions today are not nearly as complex, but this would have been a suit that they were going to go out walking, but it was to be seen and to see others.
You know, when I saw these at first, I thought it was smocking on the front.
It almost looks like smocking.
It does.
It almost looks like smocking. Smocking has a little bit of a different technique where the needle goes in through the ridges, and this is actually stitched.
It's really stitched. And
Stitched
all by
and
hand.
all the way across. Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
You know,
It
the
sure is.
other aspect of the difficulty is the
Yes.
pattern that was used for this. I sew as well. And I look for very simple patterns. You know, there's a front, there's a back. But
I
this
do.
was
I'm with you.
multiple layers.
I'm with you. Especially something like this, because again, it's all, I know we don't see the back here, but it's all attached. That skirt has 3 layers. Also understanding at this point, we still had that hoop, that ring, even though the bustle was pushed to the back. This is really hard to get on a mannequin. I can't imagine trying to get this on in real life. I truly can't. It took 3 of us to get it on the mannequin, but it's fun to look and even seeing some of the styles that we have today that incorporate things, fringe jackets,
Mhm.
tall collars, smocking.
You
All
ready
right.
for the next?
Yeah, let's do that. Oh, day suits. So from 1895, 1905, the shift that moves those corsets from the side to the bell to the back to just slendering it out, just completely slendering it out. This particular walking suit is fun because, again, it is all completely hand done. I have to say, I always marvel at that because during this period of time, we did have sewing machines, but every bit of this was hand stitched.
Mm.
Hand stitched. See those welted pockets, the sleeves.
Mm.
And at this period of time, too, we were starting to experiment with different types of weaving and patterns and fabrics. And this is wool,
Mm.
which here in the South, that's a bad word. I know up north, wool is wonderful. Wool down here, we have the humidity and those hot days. We think of wool as just too much. But wool is actually the perfect fabric. It breathes.
It breathes.
It
Yeah.
breathes. So this is where we start seeing more of that incorporated into what that looks like with those suits and day suits. And even then, the fact that it's even a suit, that's a fun story too. because of
So
course women,
this is two pieces.
it's two pieces.
Ah,
It is two pieces. And even though you probably would not wear a hoop with this particular one, you would still have something up underneath it. One, to keep from rubbing your skin, and second of all, to give it just a little bit more of a fullness. But you still couldn't show your ankles. You still had to have high boots. Now, the top of the collar is a little bit open. Now, this piece came to me like this. I don't know if there was any other piece that they would have worn under this particular one, but that's a big deal because really we had all these high collars, very proper, very proper, but we start getting into the suit. And what happens about this period of time is that we're starting to see more of the women liberation, marches, and they're just getting under their feet. We're having a little bit more in the workforce, although it's not what we think of today. We were going outside of the home a little bit more than what we were when we would stay at home in those dresses, definitely.
now I'm thinking this is the kind of clothing that, in a sense, was a part of that liberation because it looks like you can actually move a little easier.
You can.
with this.
You can. What's interesting though, you see those pockets, that welted pocket?
Mhm.
It is a perfectly made welted pocket, but it's not a pocket. Yeah, it does not let you put anything inside there.
That's, It's always been my complaint about women's clothing.
Yeah, and for the longest time, and really it was because through a lot of this period that we're talking about, women were seen as really not having a lot of things of value that we needed to carry. Now, I didn't live then, so I don't know, but I do know now that I can't live without pockets. I have to put my phone in one, keys in the other, carry a purse, all that good stuff. I could have never done that. But yeah, these were perfectly made welted pockets, and yet they're not real pockets. They stop. Yeah.
As I'm looking at this, I'm thinking of
Florence Nightingale.
now this, it just seems to me like this is the kind of outfit she
Yes.
actually could do that work in.
Very much so. And even those nursing outfits during that period of time looked very similar to this. That's another example of working outside the home. Teachers, nurses, all these different areas. It's hard to comprehend today because, of course, we do so much outside of the home. But during these periods of time, that really was not the case. Yeah, it's not the case. So clothing was not as diverse in our wardrobes as they are today.
Yeah.
You had what you wore at home. You had what you wore out. Very few outfits, even for those that were considered middle to upper class. You just didn't have a whole lot in your wardrobe.
Well, I remember pictures of some of the houses from this period where there were no closets. They were just pegs.
Yes. No, it is. It's true. And that's why. If you had 6 outfits, whoo, you were big time. This is one of those that they did wear out working. Now, somebody probably wore this also to go to the store. It wasn't just a field dress. Sometimes the field dresses were a little bit more simple, especially up here around the collar. This one has some needlework. But ironically, this probably could have served as both. This particular dress, this dress right here is made out of cotton, a beautiful lightweight cotton, and yet it is like tissue paper.
Wow.
The fabric was probably starched because that's actually what it feels like. And I can only imagine that there was starch after washing, starch to get it to look crisp. That when you touch this dress, the fabric actually kind of just splits. It's called shattering. It just starts to open up. I never did expect it out of this particular dress. And the first time that we started putting it on there, I thought, I can put this on there myself. Because again, it takes 3 or 4 people to kind of get these on here. I do. We take 3 people to put this on a mannequin now because of that. It is so delicate.
But it makes sense that because their washing was also in very, very hot water.
Yes.
And it had to be scrubbed because they didn't have some of the chemicals that we have today. So it would wear it out. And the fact that you may have worn this at least half of your life, It's not like it's one day a week. It's 3 or 4 days a week. Yeah.
It's true.
Okay.
It is. It's true. And still wearing pantaloons and stuff underneath this. So we ditched, for the working at the house, you ditched the hoops, but you were still wearing probably 3 layers.
Wow.
Ultimately.
Even in cotton, that would become warm.
It really would. So this one, this was probably more of a upper middle and upper class. I hesitated at first, whenever I did my purchase, because when I saw the picture, I was not looking very closely at it, and that was not usual for me. The second time I saw this, it took my breath away, because again, the collar that's on the far right underneath that cameo, that collar is hand done. Across the bust, again, those are all stitched. Huh. The shoulders, doing that embroidery and then attaching that. It also has some beautiful embroidery on the sleeves that look just like the shoulder, but those pleats that are on there, those were machine stitched. So you start seeing this fabulous transition, even though the dresses may look a little bit similar. The person that owned this piece was the granddaughter that ended up selling this piece. And she said that these cameos have never left this. And I do believe her, because they're almost attached completely to the dress at this point. There probably was not a hoop, probably still wearing some layers underneath this, because this does go to the floor. But this is kind of in that period of time where we're starting to see transitions, walking suits, different attire that starts being added to our wardrobes, not just the big gala dress or the big party dress or the dress only going to town. We're starting to see more diversity within this period of time.
Should we
do the next one? Yes.
Oh, here is where we can see that bustle that you talked about.
Yes. We've seen the pictures, the bust that is really thrust forward, like it's called the pigeon, okay? Pigeon. And this look is considered the S look, because for a short period of time, and it really was pretty short, they were pushing the ribs forward, as in that far left, and then flat front below the chest, and then pushing it out the back. Now, the body was actually contorted into an S shape if you looked at it from the side. And that's probably why it didn't last very long, because that was very uncomfortable. And I can't imagine trying to wear that particular dress. But we're starting to see more embellishments too. This is probably still a middle class, maybe upper class arena, but the embellishments around the skirts are starting to have different ruffles up underneath them. It's not the first time we've seen silk. Silk has been around since 5000 BC. But how we treat silk and the garments and the fabrics that we made out of silk. Garments were made to last if they were worn often. And so they put these ruffles and these different treatments on the bottom so they would take the brunt. The one that's on the right, the red one, that's all one piece again. Still fascinating to me, because it's extremely difficult to get that on a mannequin. Much less to say that the waist is probably a 21-inch waist. It's extremely small. But look at the buttons and the trims and the features, doing a color and a print. Now, this is a print. It's hard to tell kind of in that picture, but it's a little dot print. Different fabrics. So different fabrics. We're starting to see people experimenting with what it looks like with fashion.
Well, I never thought about the fact that all those other things look like single units, whereas this really does look like it's a 3-piece. And that blouse obviously is only a blouse, and yet it's not, you said.
Yeah, it's still attached. There may be one of your viewers that are watching that may understand why it was still one piece, why it wasn't 3 pieces at this point, but they're starting.
The other thing that occurs to me as you talk about a 21-inch waist, I remember having a 21-inch waist, but I was a teenager. And I think I weighed 100 pounds at the time.
I love it.
That must have been extremely uncomfortable for a woman,
Seriously.
especially if they had had a child. Oh,
Seriously.
okay. Are you ready for the next?
Let's do. Let's do. I love this piece. I love this piece. The reason why this one is in here, even though we're talking mostly about Edwardian and Victorian clothing and during that transition, what is so fun about this piece is this is the start right before the flapper. We do not have much time between the turn of the century and the flapper, but this dress sits right in the middle of that. And you can really see how we're still looking at the layers. There's lots of layers here. There's 4 in that skirt. There's 3 on the top. So we're still talking layers, but there's no corset.
Yeah.
There's no corset. And that's important because when we get to the flapper, we ditch all that. And actually we ditch basically everything. We go from one to the other. But here we still have some undergarments and then slips and just the different layers, which kind of wink to what it looked like previously in the Edwardian. A lot of this is hand stitched. This is silk and still pretty much intact. So it's very nice. So whoever had this took very good care of it. You can only imagine that it probably would have been somebody that was an upper class. Mm-hmm. Because of being so well kept and how this looks.
The other thing that I notice is that bow in the back.
Yes.
Is that a nod to the bustle or?
It is. Ironically, it just seemed like we couldn't get rid of the bustle completely. We still had some kind of padding on the back. And what was so ironic about this, when we were putting it together, we tried very hard to make it into a bow, what we think of as a bow. And it was not working. And so as I'm talking to other people that have the same passion and we're looking through clothes and trying to figure this out, once we looked at the hooks and the way the hooks went, there was no other way to put it than this way right here. As I started researching more, they didn't put bows on the back. It wasn't a bow. It was still that reminiscent of that bustle that was just attached to the back side of the clothing. But it's a beautiful dress.
I think there was some detail on this one that we wanted to look at, didn't we?
This detail is really fun. If you notice that sleeve over here on the far right, wadding up fabric, making these neat little, they look like beads from afar, but really that's wadded fabric and stitched. And then the ruffle on the sleeve, the beautiful shawl look of the dress itself. And even on that far left, bringing up that fabric, whenever you're looking at the fabric itself and doing the construction of it, it's not flat. So they didn't just take a flat piece of fabric and then just decided to bring it up. That actually has longer pieces that kind of run down that side. So they were experimenting with a lot of different things. It wasn't just keeping that bustle thought in the back or the hoops. They were keeping the bustle thought with
the bow.
And then that across that front and that bodice, that is also that hand stitched. But now we're in a crisscross. It's not just a straight across horizontally or vertically. Now we're doing some cross look with that. This is a defining moment. That's why I love this period, because we go from this to the flapper very quickly. And quite honestly, from 1850 to 60 to 70 to 80, that 80 period to 1915, that's not very long. That's not very long. But then fashion completely explodes. We have a lot that's going on during this period of time.
I think we have one more, don't we?
Do we have one more?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. The wedding dress. Even when it pops up there, it just takes my breath away. It really does. First of all, these dresses typically didn't survive. We keepsake our wedding dresses for the most part today. That's something if we do that, it's not considered strange. Back during this period of time, that was not the intent. They wore these dresses and then they wore them again. They continued to wear these dresses. It went into their wardrobe. A lot of times they were disassembled, made into something slightly different. This one is still, well, and I started to say intact. It's shattered. We talked about shattering earlier. This is silk, and this dress is quite shattered. The gentleman that did this, he is close to us. He's about an hour away, and he just did a spectacular job. He frames things, but he had never framed a dress like this before. His name is Hank, and he's at Art World. He had to make braces inside this fabric so he could actually stitch it, and it wouldn't fall apart. It was so important for us to get this dress preserved because, first of all, just look at the design, the sleeves, the beautiful dust ruffle underneath. Looking at the front hem, it looks like it's torn. It's not torn. It's actually how they made it. First of all, with silk, if you put a hem underneath it like we traditionally do now, put hems, it would have completely torn the bottom of that dress. So that's not even a consideration with doing a dress like this. Didn't have a hem, but it had a band that went right across the front. Horsehair, something like this. It was a completely different type of fabric. Then you have these ruffles. That ruffle took all the harsh elements as it walked across the concrete, across the floors. That's what protected the skirt.
Brenda, this has been such an extraordinary visit through the ages. I have some other questions, though, that I want to ask.
What you got?
I want you to talk just a little bit more about your studio. Okay. What is it that you hope to achieve through your, you called it the Everything Fiber?
Everything Fiber Studio.
What are you trying to accomplish there?
When fast fashion came along about the 40s-ish, it was right after the Second War. Think about the washing machines. I mean, we're starting to fill our homes and all this good stuff. Fast fashion appeared. Young people during that period of time, they had expendable cash. They wore T-shirts. They bought jeans. They were starting to clothe with other things. But fast fashion has its place in the fact that sometimes we really just want a good old T-shirt. I love T-shirts. It's not a bad thing. But I do believe that sometimes we've become so disconnected from our clothing. Clothing used to be, how should we dress? When we were wearing all these big dresses and stuff like that, the whole topic was, how should I dress? Am I appropriate? Am I within the social class? Am I exhibiting what I'm supposed to be? But now we can ask the question, who am I when I dress? And when that shifts, all of a sudden, we have this beautiful array that's just open to us to where we can go, what do we need? Am I going from breakfast to a job? Around here, we have a lot of fields, and I got to say, I've been on a tractor myself. I know when they get to me, they're really desperate. I have to say that. I've been sitting at my desk at the office doing interviews, doing meetings, and then had to be on the tractor and worked, 3 or 4 hours on the tractor. And I had to have clothing that was going to do that. My shoes. What was I wearing? We have such a diverse lifestyle now. We need clothing that works with that. So every morning when we wake up and we walk to our closet, what do we pick? What do we clothe ourselves with? What do we decide? The world has opened up to us, especially with technology and everything like that. And it makes it really fun. But being that really there's nothing that's new. I mean, you saw those puffy sleeves. I mean, we had puffy sleeves back with the gunny sacks, back in 1970s.
I was thinking of Diana's wedding gown.
Yes.
Princess Diana's with the big mutton sleeves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And really looked very similar to that dress that we were even looking at. It evolves. So the way we use it, the fabrics we use, the technology, how we get there, all of that evolves. So the purpose of the sewing part of the shop is to really get people back connected to what it looks like. So we learn hairpin lace, that color that had the beautiful, you learn how to do that in the studio. We have sewing classes from beginning to advanced to flat patterns, how you make patterns, how you drape patterns, and then what do you do to embellish it? We do felting, wet felting, needle felting, all these different things. Weaving, we have classes with weaving. And what does it look like when you're weaving? What do we weave? Cotton? Do we weave wool? Do we weave
Linen.
weave? It is. And once we start thinking about where we've come and what we have as options for us, people can either choose to come in the store and find organically sourced and small batch clothing. And then maybe they want a different piece and they have something in mind that they want, but they can't find. They can come and learn how to do that. I find it very interesting. The young folks are coming back in droves to learn how to sew.
Interesting. You know, I must tell you a little story now. I mean, I've sewn for many, many years. In fact, there was a period of time when I actually sewed everything I wore. No, that's not true. I didn't do the small stuff.
That's fun. That's fun.
Yeah. But once you have sewn and you know how things are constructed, you find it much harder to buy off the rack.
Yes, you do.
You say, this isn't done right.
Yes, you
This
do.
is cheap material. And you become much fussier.
Which is why in the front part with the boutique, we do have to have people that align up with how we feel.
Yeah.
And they do need to be well made and they need to be really fine fabrics.
Yeah.
And that is why we kind of curate that, because it's true. The first time you see a garment and the plaids are not met or the stripes are not together.
Yeah, little details.
All of a sudden you kind of go, wait a minute.
Brenda, I can't believe we are out of time, but I want to take a minute. You said young people are coming in. How would you advise a 20-something who is just entering the workforce on how to select their wardrobe? I mean, that's a big, huge question. We could do a whole show on that. But what are a couple of things they could really think about?
So the quick version would be, I would recommend, first of all, to figure out who you are and what you want. What are you wanting to say with how you're dressing? That's very important because that is the first thing people see before you ever open your mouth.
Yeah.
Is what you're wearing. And then look at your budget. How much do you have in your budget? Find the pieces that you know you are going to wear a lot. There's a lot of secondhand stores. We have some great ones here, and where they either hung in the closet, still have tags, or they were lightly worn, but you can find some great jackets, pieces, things like this, and pull those into your wardrobe. And then start figuring out what other pieces you need. Create your capsules. Do you need skirts? Do you need pants? Do you need some of both? And then if you would like to sew, then figure out what that looks like. What are those pieces? Can you make simple tops to go with what you're looking at? And once you start building this together and you have that core wardrobe, then you can start expanding and going different directions and finding these pieces that you know, first of all, they're not going to be out of style in 6 months or 2 years, but that you can still wear. Yeah.
Fabulous.
It's fun.
The more you're talking, the more I think, well, no, let's see, there's also this and there's also that.
It is. And then you can take it apart and you can put it back together and you can dye it. And
the other day I was meeting with some friends at a coffee shop and I saw a young person that had a jacket on. And I simply loved the color of it. So I went over to her and I said, I just have to tell you that color of that jacket is so beautiful on you. And she said, oh, and she told me exactly that it was a one she had gotten at a thrift store, where it was, what the store was called.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
It is, because really, and it sounds like she was wearing it with pride.
Definitely. And I could tell she had put together a whole wardrobe. I don't say wardrobe, an outfit. She had a real outfit on with that jacket.
It makes a huge difference. Yes, it does. And when you have pieces that maybe are a little tired, would you still love them?
Yeah.
You can take them in here. You can cut the sleeve off here. You can do a re-dye.
Yeah.
You can
all kinds of
All
things.
kinds of things you can do.
Brenda, this has been so much fun. I knew it would
Oh,
be.
I love this. I love this, Madeline. This
I
speaks to
thank
my
you.
heart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And what I'm thinking is, depending on what my audience reaction is to this, maybe we should take that another tour from flappers to say
Oh
1950 or
my
something to
goodness.
see what happened
Oh,
with fashion then.
whew,
I
whew,
mean, it's just a
whew.
thought. We'll
Uh,
see.
uh, I was going to say, I've got some beautiful flapper
Beautiful things.
dresses.
All right. Well, Brenda Buck, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madeline. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Dugald Hine wrote a book called At Work in the Ruins, Accompanying Each Other in a Time of Collapse. Hine says on his website, quote, I go looking for ways to make sense of the troubles around and ahead of us, the deep roots of how we got here, and the work that might contribute to a world worth living for. To do this, he poses 4 questions for people to ponder. The first is to look for the good things that are worth salvaging from the systems and structures of the world that is ending and the world that you want to bring into the current world. That question certainly was in my mind as I was watching those beautiful pieces from that Brenda was talking about. The second question is what is it that you have to mourn? Those good things that you really are not going to bring with you into the new world. The third was, what are the stories behind those things that you can't bring in that perhaps turn out to be seeds in worlds that we can't imagine yet? And his fourth question is noticing the things that were never as good as we told each other they were about and the way we've been doing life around here lately. Let me read that again. Noticing that the things that were never as good as we told each other they were about the way we've been doing life around here lately. Now, he's talking really big stuff. But, fashion's still a part of that. But so is management. So I'm not going to talk about the troubles around and ahead of us, but I'm going to borrow one of the questions he asks as I think about what Brenda has just shared on fashion in the late 19th century and early 20th. That first question, to look for the good things that are worth salvaging. There are things that we might want to salvage. Today we see clothing that has very little shape, for example. Drawstring pants and hoodies. As I looked at those cinched in waists, I'm actually glad we left them behind. Yet, I long for clothing that highlights the form of a person's body. For example, when I meet someone, I like to be able to see that they carry themselves with confidence. It's hard to see when they're swathed in thick jersey. A soft flowing silk always presents the shape of the body, even when it is covered with layers, as we've seen. Now, silk is expensive today, as it always has been, but modern science has given us new options. Now, polyester really doesn't have the same drape as silk, but fabric made from bamboo has a softness that I doubt any dress in the 19th century could enjoy. Now, when we are faced with a change in our lives, it's so easy to wish for what we had before, rather than ask for exactly the same. Can we ask instead, as Hine asks, what are the good things we know are worth salvaging? For example, if AI can give you all the answers, how can we use AI in a manner that encourages our curiosity and creativity? How can we use it so that we learn more rather than just become dependent on it? In that example, a team using AI purposefully could become more innovative. So what can you salvage from the past? Now, being resilient, the team leader knows the team likes to define how they work and so allows the team to explore possibilities for using AI that doesn't get in the way of creativity or curiosity. In fact, they may develop ways to increase curiosity, which is a deeper goal than simply being up to date on trends. Another example, when a new manager is assigned to your unit, changes are likely. They'll bring their own personality, their own ways of working. Perhaps where your prior boss gave members time to explain the detailed status of a project, now you're expected to get it across in 3 minutes or less. You feel uncomfortable because the new manager doesn't know you or your work, and you can't figure out how to let them know your value. So what can you salvage from the past? Then perhaps you remember that your new boss's boss, likes to see comments from clients. So you pull out a recent email from one of your clients talking about how she enjoyed working with you and why. Your new boss will appreciate this for themselves, if they're smart, and they'll learn about you and how you work. When we think we can't learn or use things from the past, we may not have given it enough thought. This show is about offering possibilities so that when you encounter the unexpected, you have options from which to choose. My question to you is to think about something that is old-fashioned. Is it old-fashioned because it uses old technology or because it feels strange? In any case, consider the deeper reason why it is no longer used and ask yourself, what can be learned from its failure? It's not being used anymore. What deeper purpose did it serve, and how are they being met today? Look at the possibilities. Dugald-Hind, at work in the ruins, accompanying each other in a time of collapse. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope this conversation has offered not just new ideas, but a different way of noticing, one that restores attention to what we borrow from the past to make the present better. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.